What's going on, my broskiis? My name is Toadskii, back again here to bring you guys yet another One Piece Treasure Cruise video. So in today's video, we are going to be talking about the brand new batch of Limit Break expansions. Typically, every time they release a new treasure map, they like to release a couple of new units for Limit Break expansion, and this is going to be happening. It hasn't been announced yet, but likely when the new treasure map is officially announced and when the treasure map Sugo is officially announced, we're probably going to get this information. Now, I'll go through all the characters in this list here. There aren't that actually many characters compared to some of the previous Limit Break expansion batches that we've had. So, yeah, we're going to be going through all these characters, talking about whether each character is worth it or not, and we'll go from there. So, let's go ahead and start things off. Massive shout out once again to Lord for actually finding out this information. Lord's a huge contributor to finding out information in the game, so massive shout out to him for his continued work. So thank you very much to Lord. Let's start things off with the treasure map characters. So typically every time they release a new batch of Limit Break expansions, they release two new ones for treasure map units. So the first one is the ID of 2137, which is Crocodile. Crocodile unfortunately doesn't see that much play anymore, but when he first got released, he was really good for like Katakuri teams and Neptune teams and Buggy teams, like basically teams that were relatively weak or teams that just needed like a burst of really good damage. He could provide that because he swaps into your captain spot and all that kind of thing, which is pretty interesting. But all the treasure map units, of course, do not get buffed captain effects after their Limit Break expansion, of course. Now, as for his cooldown, he goes down to an 8-turn cooldown after expansion, so that's actually pretty good. Okay, and we go past where he gets his Limit Break expansion unlocked with a key. He just gets stats and the cooldown, which is what you'll typically see of a TM unit getting an expansion. Look, I wouldn't suggest this just because Crocodile is just rarely ever seen used in the game. And look, if you need to use Crocodile, he's still got a normal 10-turn cooldown just by himself. That's not a big deal. The only thing that you're missing out on is these stats here, just some extra stats, which doesn't really matter. His captain ability doesn't change. You just get 2 turns of cooldown, which he doesn't really need in the first place. So no, I wouldn't suggest wasting materials on this guy. The next one is 2510, which is Edward Weevil. Edward Weevil, one of the better treasure map units in the game, and he's definitely one of the the top tier ones that you should be maxing out first. He's really good. Now, as for this guy, he gets 2 turns of cooldown, which for his special, this is awesome to get him down to a 12-turn cooldown. That's so good, and of course he just gets additional stats. So if we have a look at his stats right now after Limit Break expansion, over 4,000 HP now is great. With Cotton Candies, he's over 2,000 attack. I do personally think this is a character worth spending the additional materials on, because he's really good on hypothetically if you have Legend Carrot, for example, being a striker slasher, reducing his cooldowns even further just makes him just more usable. So I think that out of the two, he's definitely the better of the two, and just him being a unit, and also his Limit Break expansion is better, because he actually would deserve the cooldown a lot more than Crocodile, so that's really good. So I do actually suggest Edward Weevil. Now, as for the generic rare recruits, let's start things off with 754, which is Jabra. This unit really doesn't see play at all. He's a really old unit. He did recently get a support effect, which is actually not too bad. So he only attaches to Lucci and Kaku once per adventure when the supported character uses a special, changes all orbs on the characters on your team to the supported character slot. So if you've got hypothetically I don't know, a tandem slot on the character and your whole team makes tandem beneficial, then when you use the special of the unit, all your team gets tandem slots. It's interesting, to say the least. Now, as for what this guy does, he gets it down to a 5-turn cooldown, so he gets a lot of cooldown there. He doesn't even get a buffed captain effect, which is whatever. He's a 1.75 orb booster. Look, no, this is just not worth it. He does get this, though. This is interesting. This is a brand new potential ability that is able to be unlocked for certain rare recruits. Reduce ship bind special duration. So that is the effect where the enemy blocks out your ship for a certain period of time. There are potential abilities now that can remove that. But look, how common is the ship despair effect? That's not a common debuff. There are only a very small amount of content in the game that actually do that to your team. So, and the thing is even in that type of content, you're not going to be wasting a crew slot on a character like this. So, no, I wouldn't suggest it. But something you have to keep in mind is that rare recruits with their Limit Break expansion do not take that many materials to max out. So if you have spare materials here and there and you do use the character quite often, you could potentially go ahead and expand his Limit Break. As for this guy, Cy Frankie, not a very usable unit these days. He does get some cooldown. He's a 2x orb booster for Cy characters. He does not get a buffed captain effect. He does get a new potential ability though, which is the, again, reduced ship bind duration. But again, a character that just never sees play, so I wouldn't suggest that. 1481 is Vanderdecken, a pretty old unit again. What does this guy get? No buffed captain effect. He gets 5 turns of cooldown. He is a bind and special bind remover. He does damage through barriers, only to one enemy though, so that's not too great. And he also gets the reduced Sailor Despair duration. So this is actually a new debuff that's actually going to be in some content tomorrow. Raid Bonnie is starting tomorrow as of me recording this video. And this is where they introduce for the first time the ability to lock out or completely silence a character's crewmate effect. So any crewmate effect that hypothetically reduces special bind duration or a crewmate effect that gives you a beneficial slot, they're cancelled out. And this is a type of a specific effect that can resist turns of that. So this might see more play in the future, but even on Japan standards, it's not a very common debuff, so I really wouldn't worry about it too much. Vanderdecken himself as a unit is not very good either. Next is Hina, one of my favorite rare recruits as well. I think Hina is a fantastic unit, especially in like Kizuna Clash, for example, because there aren't too many units that are like high level color affinity boosters, and this unit can definitely provide that. So a lot of additional stats there, which is good. She gets 3 turns of cooldown. That is pretty impressive, I must say. And she does get she doesn't even get another potential ability. That's a little unfortunate. So she doesn't get a 3rd potential effect. That's odd. Really, really odd. But she does get the 3 cooldown. I would say if this is a character that you do use often, or if they release a really powerful quick or Psy captain that Hina can be put on those teams, potentially, you know, this might be a unit you might want to look into, because that 3 turns of cooldown is very good. So I'd say if you use this character often, go for it. If not, it's not really a big deal. 2183 is Bala Hancock. She released with the White Bit of Marco batch. I don't think I've actually used this unit since I've pulled her. She just doesn't need to be used. Doesn't get a buffed captain effect. 3 turns of cooldown reduction. She does give the attack, or 2 times attack, to sign int. So it's good. She actually has a good special, but she just doesn't see that much play because, like, she is an int character herself, and if you want an int character that boosts int character's attack, more often than not, you're going to be using V2 Shanks or something a little bit different. So in that circumstance, yeah, she's basically a weaker version of V2 Shanks if you're just talking about an int team specifically. So that's a little bit unfortunate, but yeah, I really wouldn't suggest wasting materials on her. 2242 is Cracker. So Cracker came out with Big Mom, of course. Cracker does get 4 turns of cooldown. That's actually very impressive. Because this guy, I don't really see too many situations where this guy's going to be good, but he does give you a 1.75 attack and or boost to Strength X Quick, so he is actually like not too bad. On a 10-turn cooldown, like that's not bad. As I said, it's pretty good, but again, like you have to waste a crew slot in this guy, and more often than not, you'll probably find a better unit compared to this guy. Just depending on what type of team you're running, I guess. So I'd say it's up to you at the end of the day, but like 4 turns of additional cooldown for a character like this, if you use him often, and that goes with many things. If you use the character a lot, I mean, it's probably worth maxing the character out as best as you can. 2271 is the next one, which is Watatsume. This guy basically never sees play, so what does he get? He gets 3 turns of cooldown, so he does, including block orbs into matching orbs, so left column matching, 0.7 chain boost for 2 turns. It's a pretty bland special for an 8-turn cooldown. And he does get the reduced ship bind duration when he is max limit broken here. So I guess you could use him for that, but again, it's not a very common debuff, so you don't really have to worry about it. The next, we've only got 2 rare recruits to go. 2346 is going to be, oh, it'd be nice if I could type. 2346 is going to be Galette. Galette is a pretty good unit. I actually think that she's one of the better rare recruits just out of all the ones that we've talked about so far. I actually do use her a lot. She works very well under Carrot. So what does she get? She gets the 1 turn of cooldown. I mean, oh no, she doesn't get 1 turn of cooldown. She doesn't get any cooldown with her limit break expansion. 1 turn down, one turn cooldown just with generic limit break. So what does she get? Sailor Despair resistance. Does it say how many turns? It doesn't say how many turns, okay. But reducing Sailor Despair duration is good. It's just, as I said, it's a very uncommon debuff right now. So unless if that's a more commonplace debuff that you're going to be seeing more often, this character could definitely see play just to remove some of that, but personally speaking, I don't think it's that big of a deal right now. She does get some additional stats, right? Yeah, so that's not too bad of an increase. 200 additional attack, 350 HP. Look, I do think that out of all the units here, like, she is probably one of the better ones and does see more play. But most of the time, you don't need that maxed effect in order to get the most out of Galette. And 2481 is the last of the rare recruits, being Hyozo. This guy's a utility beast. Very good. So let's see what he gets. He does get 2 turns of cooldown. Wow. Oh, this guy on a 10-turn cooldown is kind of nuts. He removes blindness completely. He poisons an enemy, reduces despair and special bind by 5 turns, as well as resisting it by 3 turns on himself. That's a little weird though. You know, resisting it by 3 turns, but then removing it by 5 is very odd. Changes adjacent orbs into matching, and then you can swap your orbs 3 times. Pretty good, honestly. And he does get reduced Sailor Despair duration. Okay, that is pretty nice, actually. So, take that as you will. I do think Galette and Hyozo are the best of the rare recruits here. Hina is kind of okay, depending on the situation, because the cooldown's kind of nice. So, Hina, Galette, and Hyozo seem to be the best out of these rare recruits, right? But now we've got the legends to go through. So, let's go through each of the legends. The first of the legends in terms of ID is 2007, which is V2 Shanks. We actually just talked about him a little earlier. So, V2 Shanks, he does get some pretty nice statistical increases. Now he's over 4,000 HP without cotton candies, nearing 2,000 attack with no cotton candies, and a very solid recovery stat. So he does get a buff captain effect. V2 Shanks gets a buff captain. Now, if your crew has 4 more characters of the same color or typing, boost the attack of all characters by 3.75 times, 3 times otherwise, and then HP of all characters by 1.3. So the only thing that they have changed is the multipliers, going from 2.75 base to 3x, and going from 3.5, you know, with all the right colors, to a 3.75. So it is a buff, but is it worth running over some of the other characters in the game? That's up to you at the end of the day, but it's a buff nonetheless. Now, as for everything else, he does get a 2-turn cooldown reduction. I think that is crazy good. For his special, like one of the best specials in the game, and 0.9 chain boost, and a 2.25 type boost, and a full board of matching slots, obviously if you use him correctly, on a 12-turn cooldown is ridiculous. I do think that if you have the materials available, and if this is a character you use quite often, I would consider Limit Break expanding Shanks. But as I said, only if you really use him that often, because you can still get away with him with a 14-turn cooldown. That's still reasonable. But 12 turns is just nuts for what he's able to do. And of course, Legends already have 3 potential abilities. So that's impressive. I'm actually pretty impressed with what they've done with Shanks. He is really good. But now moving on to the next one, which is Brook, 2236. Brook, he doesn't really see like that much play at all, really. I mean, like, who's using Brook in 2020? Not too many people are. So Brook does get some stat increases, of course. Yeah, not too bad. A really high recovery stat. He does get a buffed captain effect. Right, so his buffed captain effect is boost the attack of all characters by 3.25 if your HP is above 99% at the start of the turn, 2.5 otherwise, and obviously you can see there previously it was a 2.75 above 99% and then 2 times otherwise. So he did get a much higher increase compared to Shanks. Shanks only got like a 0.25 increase. This guy got a 0.5 increase. And then it says cut the HP of all enemies by 10% at the end of each turn. And then if you get a game over, you can revive. So all of that stays the same. The only thing that changes is the multipliers. So I don't think it's that much of a buff, considering you still have to be above 99%, which is very difficult to do in this day and age. So I'm not the biggest fan of that. He does get 1 turn of cooldown. That's actually not bad. It would have been nice if we went down to 11. Like if you got 2 turns of cooldown reduction, that would have been absolutely broken. His special is really good. Like, honestly, this is one of the best parts about this unit. Like, obviously, the game over revive thing is a bit of a meme, but, like, honestly, most people are using him as a sub nowadays. Beneficial slots, healing, damage reduction. He also has the ability to cut enemies' HP or kill them, depending on the max HP of the enemy. So, really good. But, again, Brook isn't really used that much, and you're only getting 1 turn of cooldown from it, so it's not that much of a big deal, even if you don't Limit Break expand him, so that's unfortunate for Brook. And then the last character in this video that we'll talk about is Jinbe V2. Jinbe V2, yeah, look, I've already had a look at what Jinbe V2's Limit Break expansion is, and I'm pretty unimpressed, but we'll talk about it anyway. His stats go up, like, what a monstrous increase to his HP there. He's just under 2,000 attack, and his recovery barely goes up. But that is a huge HP increase right there. Now, as for his captain effect, it's pretty much the exact same. The only difference is that normally, normal V2 Jinbe, if you don't have a beneficial slot, he's only a 3 times attack. When you do have a beneficial slot, it's a 3 point, when you don't have a beneficial slot with his Limit Break expansion, it goes to a 3.5. So at the lowest, you're 3.5, and if you do have a matching slot, you're a 4 times captain. But again, you just look at Stampede Luffy. Stampede Luffy is legit just a better captain in almost every facet Well, yeah, actually, in like every facet, Stampede Luffy is just a better captain, right? He does get 2 turns of cooldown, which is pretty good, but his special is one of the main problems of the unit. If his special ability was a little bit easier to achieve, this 2.25, dude, I think V2 Jinbe, honestly, with a 6+, like, might actually be borderline broken, to be honest, because they could fix up his special conditions, buff the captain effect even more. Like, V2 Jinbe legit could be broken, but currently, as it stands, his special is very, very underwhelming. 1.75 attack to the 3 colors that he boosts, Strength X Psi, and then 2.25 if you have specifically one of each of those orbs when you launch the special. The 20% HP cut is nice. It would be nice if you get a super evolution where that, you know, is each enemy by 20% and it goes through defensive effects. That would be kind of good too. Or if they just change it to just doing like lots of damage, because health cuts get interrupted so much. I think that if it was just a huge amount of damage, like 200,000-300,000 damage to all enemies, I think that would probably be a little bit better, but it depends on the situation. Sometimes health cuts can still be a little bit useful. And of course, he doesn't get any changes to his potential effects, but there we go. That's V2 Jinbe, and that's basically it. So in terms of the legends, I do think Shanks is probably the best one because 2 turns of cooldown for him is nuts. Brook doesn't get that much of a buff. Jinbe, not that much of a buff. As for the treasure map units, Edward Weevil was awesome, so Edward Weevil is really, really good. And then for the rare recruits, I do think that Galette, Hyozo, and Hina are probably the ones you might want to think about. But there we go, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and of course, whenever we get a new batch of Limit Break expansions, I'll bring you guys a video talking about them and just giving my thoughts and opinions as to which ones I would suggest. But V2 Shanks, like this is very good. Very, very good. But anyways, that's going to wrap it up, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video today, and if you guys did enjoy it, make sure to leave a like, and if you want to stay up to date with all the content that I post, including more One Piece Treasure Cruise content, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. But on that, guys, I'll see you guys within the next video.